Hi-ho! Hi-ho!
1920s featured large-scale domestic consumption of relatively new consumer products, which was good for American industry, but much of this consumption was fueled by credit and installment buying, which, as it turned out, was totally unsustainable. While the agricultural sector suffered throughout the 1920s and farm prices kept dropping for two reasons. First, American farms had expanded enormously during World War I to provide food for all those soldiers, and second, the expansion led many farmers to mechanize their operations. As you'll know if you've ever bought a tractor, that mechanization was expensive, and so many farmers went into debt to finance their expansion, and then a combination of overproduction and low prices meant that often their farms were foreclosed upon. And a lot of rich people lost money in the market, but what made the Great Depression was massive unemployment and accompanying hardship, and this didn't actually begin until like 1930 or 1931. By the end of 1931, 2,294 American banks had failed, double the number that had gone under in 1930. Now, it's easy to criticize poor Herbert Hoover for not doing enough to stop the Great Depression, and he probably didn't do enough, but part of that is down to our knowledge of what happened afterward, the New Deal. That Franklin Delano Roosevelt at least tried to do something about the Depression makes us forget that when Hoover was president, orthodox political and economic theory counseled in favor of doing nothing. And at least Hoover didn't follow the advice of his Treasury Secretary, who, according to Hoover anyway, argued that the solution was to, quote, liquidate labor, liquidate stocks, liquidate the farmers, liquidate real estate. White House meeting, he persuaded a large number of industrialists to agree to maintain wage rates. He also got the Federal Farm Board to support agricultural production and got congressional approval for $140 million in new public works. In January 1932, he and Congress created the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which was basically a federal bailout program that borrowed money to provide emergency loans to banks, building and loan societies, railroads, and agricultural corporations. The problem was that by 1932, bailing out the banks wasn't enough, and the Great Depression started to take shape. By early 1932, well over 10 million people were out of work, 20% of the labor force, and in big cities the numbers were even worse, especially for people of color. Like in Chicago, 4% of the population was African American, but they made up more than 16% of the unemployed. In the case of the hardships experienced during the Great Depression, it really is. The pictures of Dorothea Lange and Walker Evans and Steinbeck's description in The Grapes of Wrath of Okies leaving the Dust Bowl in the usually vain hope of a better life in California, they tell the story better than I can. Thousands of Americans took to the road in search of work, and thousands more stood in bread lines. There were shanty towns for the homeless called Hoovervilles, and there were protests like the Bonus March on Washington by veterans seeking an early payment of a bonus due to them in 1945.
what it's all about.